Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Hello and welcome to this week's Open Dialogue. This week, inshallah, we will be discussing the topic of self-sabotage. We have with us to discuss this topic our expert panel of guests. We have with us Brother Bilal Ali Hugh, who is a qualified psychotherapist with an over 14 years of experience in working in the field of mental health and psychological well-being. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Brother Bilal.
Wa alaikum salam, Sister Zainab.
We are also joined by Hujjatul Islam wal Muslimin, Sayyid Mohammad Razavi, who is a lecturer and a speaker who has represented the school of Ahlebait at various centers around the globe, as well as at various universities. Currently, he is the head of the Religious Advisory Board at the Shia Islamic Education Society in London, where he deals with clients' social and domestic issues on a daily basis. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Sayyid.
Wa alaikum assalam.
So, without further ado, I'd like to start with you, Brother Bilal. We have chosen the topic of self-sabotage today. If you could explain to the viewers and to myself, what do we mean by self-sabotage?
Yeah, so the term, Bismillah Rahman Rahim, the term sabotage is really a term that's related to making something defunct or making something not work. I think it goes back to the 15th century, sabot, this 15th century word, and it was related to a situation where they developed machines that could do the job of human beings at that time, some kind of mechanical devices, and these people took these wooden shoes, the sabot, threw them into the machines because they felt like they would lose their employment. So that's the idea of with sabot is related to the term sabotage. But then we have the ideas that come up in psychotherapy and psychology, from psychoanalysis, and they talk about self-sabotage. And self-sabotage is more related to or distinguished from when, like say, for example, somebody's doing sabotage in a military operation or political sabotage to spoil somebody's campaign or something of that nature. Self-sabotage takes place within the individual on an unconscious level. So for the viewers that are not familiar with some of those ideas related to psychoanalysis, psychodynamics, that psychology, there's a belief that we have a conscious mind, the things that is in our conscious awareness, that stays in our memory, that we can recall and that we see and we experience and remember. And then there is a process or aspect of the mind which collects thoughts, impacts our personality, our views, our attitudes, influences our behavior. And this is from the unconscious mind, the mind that's below the surface. And it sometimes shows up in the type of dreams that we have when we say, oh, we had a bizarre dream. And the argument from the psychotherapy world is that, that dreams are a manifestation of our unconscious mind, for example. It's communicating with us. So it's very symbolic. It's a very like our symbolic mind, if I can put it that way.
So in what ways do people actually self-sabotage then? So when we sabotage, what are we exactly sabotaging?
Well, to give it a definition, you could say that self-sabotage is when people do or they don't do things that block their progress or prevent them from accomplishing their goals. So there's something about the regular aims, goals, the results that we're looking for, but there's certain types of behaviors or sometimes inaction that can be related to everybody. Most of us will be familiar with procrastination. That can be a very big manifestation of a self-sabotage behavior. We have a goal to do X. We're saying that we have a goal to do X, but for some reason we're not acting on that which is in our best interest. And it kind of comes from, as I said, it comes from an unconscious place, or sometimes people don't understand. They can't really articulate, why did I not start that project earlier? Why, if the result I was looking for was A, what made me go down path B, for example? And it's to do, and the argument, as I said, is to do with the unconscious mind, something just a bit below our perception and our conscious awareness. So that's what makes it so difficult at times to identify it and challenge it.
Right. Okay. So, Syed, following what Brother Bilal just said, isn't it obvious that people should, when we have a goal in mind or something to achieve, that we would work consistently towards that and not become the obstacle in our own goals ourselves, and our actions should actually be supportive of what we are trying to achieve, not delay what we are trying to achieve. What are your thoughts about it, Syed?
Uh, we have to really look at the reason of creation, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us as best of the creations, ashraful makhluqat. And we have to then look at the definition of ashraful makhluqat, why Allah gave this title to us human beings, that we are the best of the creations. And when we disrespect the dignity and title that is given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we undermine our own dignity, we undermine our own title as Ashraful Makhluqat. So as a Muslim, we have a responsibility, as a human being, we have a responsibility not to dishonor ourselves, not to disrespect ourselves. We have to stand firm in getting our rights. If you are one of those who would just ignore everything and would let everyone rule you and let everyone oppress you, you are first of all following the steps going towards depression, and you are also undermining the honor and respect and dignity that Allah and your Creator has given to you. So we have a big responsibility from this point of view towards ourselves and also towards the creation, our creation
Syed,
for
there's a
us.
disruption in your line. There's a disruption
Also,
in your
we
line.
look at
Syed, we can't hear you. There's a disruption in your line.
environment, your behavior with the
Syed, there is a disruption in your line. We can't hear you. Brother Bilal, until the
with
Syed's connection is sorted out, I think I'll come to you. Um, so it's easy to say this, that we should you know, Syed, can
for
you hear
a
me?
while.
I can't
I
hear you.
don't know.
We can't hear you, Syed. Brother Bilal, I mean, people when people experience difficulties of life,
Yeah.
it's very daunting. It gets us down. It's very difficult to see our way through those obstacles. And so people, like you said, would resort to the easiest way of dealing with those actions, and that is, for example, through comfort eating or through other means that then become actually the obstacle. They create a further obstacle. So, how can people deal with their life issues in a proper way? And what are the kind of things that actually, first of all, get people down, that we need to recognize that when it's like a red flag of emotions or of situations that we are going through, and we should know that, okay, this situation we need to stop and evaluate and see a way out, that's a proper way, and deal with the situations properly. So what is it how how do people exactly sabotage themselves apart from the comfort eating and the procrastination that you said? And what are the life situations that get people to this stage?
Okay, so those are a couple of questions. We'll see if we can unpack that because those really interesting points, really important points as well. So one of them is the ways that people self sabotage, and it's you could categorize the actions into things that we would call destruction, where our behavior could be destructive. We destroy relationships. We
Yes.
destroy whether it's goods, products, items, whatever the case may be. It could be another kind of self sabotage. In the big category falls into inaction, failing to do things, failing to meet deadlines, failing to prepare, failing to invest in a particular way to create the kind of result you'd want, or it could be just wastage. So we've definitely heard in our society, in Britain, for example, we hear about people who come from very, let's say, economically modest backgrounds, right? And they have made it famous in one way or another, or they've come into money. And there was even a movie about somebody who won a whole load of cash years ago. It was a classic movie. It's called Spend, 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 right? And the person I don't know, it was probably in the 1970s when £1 million was a phenomenal amount of money. I mean, it's still a considerable amount of money to everyday working people, even in this day and age, 2022. But in the 1970s, for somebody to have £1 million, OMG. And this person went from being a lay person, working class person, to becoming a millionaire, which is equivalent to a multi-millionaire in today's money, and then spending more or less every rent cent and being right back in the caravan or the council house where they started out. And these things are to do with, I think that the sheikh would talk, the Sayyid would talk about soul, but as a psychotherapist, we'll talk about the psyche or the emotional self. Sometimes there's experiences that people have been through as children, and they've experienced some kind of abuse. It doesn't mean physical abuse or sexual abuse. Abuse could be just neglect, and where a child wasn't nurtured or felt the love. They were loved and taken care of, but they maybe didn't receive it in that way. That their subject to get experience was, my parents bought me everything I needed and I was never without, but I felt like they weren't emotionally available. Maybe my dad didn't speak to me. He didn't, talk words of confidence into me. And, we didn't really have a good rapport and things like this. These things can affect what we would call the inner child, that self that's forms at a very young age. And when we grow up into adults, that inner child is still in our psyches, in our minds. And so we react to situations in an adult form, but really it's that little child from 7 years old or 10 years old reacting, you could say, driving the adult body, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's a good metaphor. And so the self-sabotaging belief can be rooted from that very early stage of childhood. That's one very, very strong process that impacts our psyche, impacts our self-esteem. That word self-esteem will come up over and over again. And because of low self-esteem or poor self-esteem, people can self-sabotage. And this is, like, as I said, I'm going to emphasize it, in an unconscious way. People don't sit down there and calculate and say, I've had all these negative experiences as a child. I feel a bit, damaged inside. And so I'm going to go out and waste my wages, or I'm going to fail to prepare for the promotion interview and just not get that promotion and not make a good showing of myself. People consciously do that, but these are the things that play out unconsciously.
It's very important point you raised there, that we can grow up but still we don't know how to deal with certain situations because we just haven't had the life exposure as children and knowing how to healthily deal with certain situations. So like this person that you just mentioned suddenly won millions of dollars or pounds. You don't know what to do with them because you've not had the background of learning how to spend that money wisely. But Sayed, we've got you back here, so please continue your point that you left. You got cut off very early on where you were talking about the human dignity and the honor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. Sayed, is our voice reaching you? I don't think the Syed can hear us.
Yes, I was. Do you have my voice?
Yes, we do.
Mm-hmm.
I can hear you, but can you hear me?
Yes, your voice is very cut off, but we can hear you.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Mm-hmm.
can.
Yes. I mean, there are two kinds of community. One type is given as to us, to all of human beings. We have to go for it. We have to achieve it. We have to, and we have responsibility and duty. Both kind of has been given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us, and the one that we have. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Holy Quran very clear, atqakum, the most dignified human being is the one himself, and and
Okay, so Syed, we can't hear you. Your connection has cut off again. Brother Bilal, you talked about self-esteem. How can people build their self-esteem, and what are the things that actually affect our self-esteem in the first place whilst we are growing up?
There's two things that really impact our self-esteem. One is relationships, fundamentally the relationships that we have. It can be related to attachment, our most primary and significant caregivers, which is generally from 99% of us, would be our parents. So the type of attachment and the relationship and the bonding style that we learn, the connections that we develop with those people, that goes on to inform the type of relationship skills that we develop and our ability to feel secure. So
Mhm.
that's that is one aspect, but also in terms of building up self esteem, is self awareness. There is developing goals. So there's one
Right.
about there's one about being developing your level of self awareness, and that could be by keeping a journal. That could be by hiring a life coach, or maybe not a life coach, but a counselor or a therapist, for example. Or there's even books, self help books. There's a whole load of self help literature and you know information out there where you can actually encourage you to keep that journals, write down goals, short term, long term, medium term goals, and to break things down into like bite sized portions, because sometimes we can feel overwhelmed when we want to accomplish something, but when we
Yeah.
break it down into pieces and segments, it enables us to make these small victories, and in this small victory, it the brain lights up, right? It's like a reward sort of system, and then it encourages us to do more. But when we look at a mountain, it's just a phenomenal mountain to climb. Then it's it can be overwhelming. I think the example I would give, and probably all the students watching would know, when you be given like a 5,000 word essay to write, and you kind of think, well, where the heck do I start with this 5,000 words? It's just a lot of words, right? But if you break it down into portions, all right, I'll speak 500 words about personality, 500 words about psyche, 500 words about the archetypes that exist, the different types of but by the time you break it down into pieces and you start to conquer each piece, then you build up a rhythm, then you build up a momentum, and then these kind of things influence like a kind of our sense of self. We achieve projects, we complete things, we get goals. I mean, we accomplish goals, and then it's like a kind. We start to believe in ourselves. There's a certain level of confidence. One of the things with a human being, black or white, young or old, rich or poor, right, is that we do not like the unknown. Although life is fraught with unknowns, the unknowns make us feel very uncomfortable. So we tend to like to set a system or set things in place where it makes us at least feel like we know the outcome, or we kind of have a strong chance of kind of predicting the outcome. And so when we are able to accomplish certain goals, that's the thing that we start to believe in ourselves, that I'm competent. I have a certain level of competence and I can conquer more goals and stuff like that. So that's one of the things that can help to build self-esteem, is confidence.
But do you think that a lot of people actually fail to set appropriate goals for themselves as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that one of the things I've identified by working with young people, and I don't know if I'm not sure if it's because it's just a stage of life, youth, young teens going into your early 20s. I think I lean more to that side of the argument, but there's so much with this social media and this internet that people are exposed to. A lot of people don't set goals. Speaking about the youth, for example, because they don't know what they really want to pursue and what they want to master, because there's so much to choose from. And they're still learning about themselves, their own insecurities, their own likes and dislikes. They're just becoming aware of the world, breaking away from their parents' direction and very tight hold and tight direction of them, finding themselves. So that could be a factor why they fail to set themselves goals. And then sometimes for older people, more mature people, it could just be habit. We never did it as a youngster, and we haven't got into that frame of mind. So we just what do you call it? Wash, rinse, and repeat. We're just going along as we've always done. When if we were to maybe take a step, take a time out and look at our lives and think, hey, what have I achieved over the last 5 years? What do I want to achieve for the next 5 years, inshallah? And how might I write myself some kind of journal or some type of keep a record of what I want to accomplish and possibly some of the steps I might need to take. Why not make a small plan? Why not have a vision board? Maybe I could cut out pictures from an old magazine and, make a kind of visual that I could put in my room or somewhere that's like gonna, hit my psyche, hit my conscious and my unconscious mind about what I want to achieve, like a kind of motivation. These things are available, but if we don't know and we never tried it before, then sometimes we just go with what, stay in our lane and go with the things that we're familiar with.
Those are very important points and tips that you gave on how to achieve goals and to set realistic goals and how to follow them through via the methods that you just mentioned. But let's talk about relationships, Brother Bilal. A lot of people, when experiencing difficulties, I think we've got the Syed back. Let me see if we can get anything out of him now. Syed, is our voice reaching you?
Yes, I'm using a different platform now to
Okay, your voice is very clear.
get
Perfect. So
into.
we can hear you
Much
now.
better. Quantum.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, so please carry on from the points you were making from the beginning, because we really could hardly make up anything you said. So you were talking about human dignity and honor and respect that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed upon
Yes,
the human.
I was saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us and given human dignity, and there are two types of human dignities. Part of it is in our nature, and other part is that we have it and achieve it during our lifetime. And if we do that, we will be able to be more successful, not only in this world and the world hereafter as well. And I quoted the verse of Holy Quran that inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that according to him, the most dignified human being is the one who is able to control himself and who is pious. I mean, piety means to control, to abstain yourself, to have self-control on yourself is a big achievement that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considers that as important. And one of the reasons that we have been given the title of best of the creations of God is because we are able to protect our dignity and and not only protect our dignity, we can achieve higher stages of dignity by self-control.
Uh, Thank you for that explanation, Syed. What would you like to say, Brother Bilal, following from the points that the Syed made about self-control? And what is going on in our minds when we are going down the self-sabotaging technique, even though subconsciously? What is actually the science of this? What is happening? Are we just overwhelmed by the situations that we are in?
I think it's more related to, it tends to be more related to us being unaware. And that is why, although there are different, what do they call it, many roads to Damascus. So although there are different ways to arrive at a particular position, but why therapy can be so powerful, because it allows us to access those, what do they call it in psychoanalysis, our shadow self. So our shadow self doesn't allude to like a dark side or malevolent side, but it just means a place where the light of our conscious mind doesn't shine. But by engaging in psychotherapy, engaging in counseling and self-awareness work, or other types of work that can get you there, it allows you to see some of your unconscious motivations by, processing some of your actions, your interactions, your relationships, understanding your triggers. And as one of my teachers would say, where does that land in you? How do you feel in your body? What's going on for you? And developing this awareness is what then gives us the power to make more conscious decisions, because we have drives as human beings, and sometimes these drives are repressed. So they're like, again, not in our consciousness, but sometimes you see people in the public realm, for example, and they've been involved in famous people. We always use their lives because they're in the public light, and you question, why would they be engaged in some of these affairs, or certain drug taking or certain behaviors or whatever? But it's because rich, poor, young or old, black or white, we have vulnerabilities as human beings. And these people, they just happen to be famous and have money and in the spotlight, but they are human like anybody else. And so their faults, their errors, their accomplishments is, all the good and the bad is there to see in the public domain. Is a big place, or a big thing that I hope we can talk about before we finish, is about relationships, because that's a big deal. That's a big aspect of self-sabotage. The subject of self-sabotage is relationships.
Why do you say that? What is it about relationships that triggers self-sabotaging in people?
Well, one thing I have to mention is the word love. That love can be relationships, marriage, romantic love. See, when we're loved by our parents, we expect a certain level of unconditional love, right? But when it's the romantic love, it's a special love, but at the same time, there's connection, but then with that connection, there's vulnerability. And so sometimes people self-sabotage because the fear of being left, the fear of being alone, it's existential fear. And so sometimes people feel more comfortable. If I've spoilt it, if I've ruined it, I've kept that distance. I haven't allowed that person to become close to me. So it's kind of a way of, sometimes people do this to keep themselves safe.
Yes.
Because it can be very vulnerable to let people in.
But then, when we are experiencing relationship difficulties, seldom people actually reach out for external help. And instead, they go down the route of substance abuse. And like you say, they self-sabotage themselves. And that obviously does not help reaching anywhere with the situation or with the relationship or improving it. Do you see examples of this, and how do you deal with them as a psychotherapist when people are experiencing relationship issues and they'd rather go down the path of substance abuse? And what makes it so hard for people actually to reach out for external help? Is it stigma? What is it?
That's one of the most impactful factors, I believe, in that preventing people from seeking help, because I think in our society, and I think compared to our US colleagues across the pond, I think that therapy is seen as quite normal, quite
Yes.
commonplace. It doesn't carry
Yes.
the same stigma. It just means I'm working through stuff, and me as a human being, I'm fallible. I have some flaws, and this process helps me. Sometimes I'm in therapy for a year. Sometimes I haven't had therapy for years. It's kind of cool, but I think in the UK we've got much more stiff upper lip and a bit tightness from the mainstream society that all of us, even from the BAME community, we kind of inherited, right? And it's just something that is very frowned upon in many circles. That it's seen as a failure, a flaw, a weakness, as opposed to when you admit, hey, I've got a problem. Hey, there's help out there. Actually, I'm actually strong enough to admit I've got a problem, and actually would seek help. That's a quality, that's a strength. But sometimes we see it as a weakness. So some of us will soldier on, bumping into the wall and crashing and falling over, and just continue along that path because to seek help would feel too demeaning.
That's a really important point that you just raised there, is that, we don't like to admit that we have a problem. The first thing to solving any relationship issue is to admit that there is a problem here. Then that's what's going to cause you to reach out and seek help. And so, how can we, I mean, we say this all the time, but how can we get this through to people that you're doing yourself a favor if you admit that there is a problem, and it does not make anybody any lesser of a human being or any less successful if they admit that they have a problem and an issue that has to be dealt with properly through the proper channels, through therapy, through seeking counsel. Uh, what would you say to people to encourage them in these kind of situations? Because let's face it, I mean, many people refuse to even admit, forget seeking help, even admit that there is a problem, and they'd rather brush it under the carpet or pass the blame. And these are techniques, I suppose, would you call this self-sabotage as well? Passing the blame instead of taking responsibility and owning the problem and trying to find a
That's
solution to it?
that's probably I would probably call that more a lack of accountability. I think that when we're able to take account, own our shortcomings, it's difficult. It's a very bitter pill, but it's amazing because that's one of the pills that's what allows us to grow is when we actually can say, hey, I got to own this. This is my shortcoming, and I really need to fix this. But what I would say, just maybe to encourage people to look at therapy from a different perspective and to maybe destigmatize it, is to just say, if we think of it, I mean, recently I wrote an essay about related to psychotherapy and senior practitioners in psychotherapy. And, searching through the material, I'm finding, it came to mind, something I'm aware of, but it came to my conscious mind or in the forefront of my mind that it's the oldest profession, right? That in ancient times, throughout the various continents, people have always had life issues, marital
Yes,
proposals, a bereavement, the crop didn't make what it was supposed to make, so the people are living in difficult economic times and things of this nature. There's always been these life issues, 400s, 4,000 of civilizations. But who did we go to? We went to the priest, we went to the sage, right? We went to different mystics. We went to but the role of talking through and seeking counselors exists as long as we have. But it just
yes,
happens to still be that in the modern era, apart from the clerics from the various, organized religion who still have a pastoral role and give people counsel, people just go in the industrialized world. They just go to see a counselor or a psychotherapist. It's the same age old talking through the issue and arriving at a maybe not that they give you advice, but they help you to work through what's going on for you inside and maybe a path that you might want to travel that would be more helpful, you know?
also this issue of having the inner child. I mean, none of us really have perfect upbringings. Everybody, because we are all human beings, our parents are human beings, in our societies, our teachers, everybody is a human being. This issue of inner child, can you elaborate a bit more on this and how it leads to self-sabotaging methods, and what is it about our upbringings that can bring so many triggers and can take us down the wrong path, if you like.
Yeah, well, you see, sometimes, let me explain what the inner child is in a very brief way. I could say the inner child is the part of the human psyche which is formed at a young age, and it's related to our life experiences, our upbringing, but also our life experiences. So it depends on not just the home, but the local external environment, those influences, right? Those things that kind of helped us, our personality to form. And that inner child exists within us as adults. And so what happens is when we're put in certain situations, the adult self may speak in an adult voice, but it's the inner child, the young self, right? That was formulated at a young age, that is really guiding us, or is really influenced. And so some people have had very difficult childhoods. Nobody's is perfect, but some people have had extremely difficult childhoods. And so they've had to do some work to go back and repair that inner child, sort of heal that inner child, so that they could move forward and they wouldn't be repeating the same mistakes, self-sabotage, like the woman who gets marriage proposal from somebody who might be more viable, but for some reason she declines. But when there are these individuals who most people would say, hey, that guy is, he's just not really a good person, or he might be a waste of time, or he may have issues with anger and aggression, but for some reason they find themselves in those situations, or attracting and being around those type of individuals. It's sometimes related to their self-belief, and so they need to go through a process of healing to see themselves as worthy, and to see themselves as, worthy of having their knight in shining armor, and not having to have a frog as a husband, or as a potential suitor, so to speak.
Thank you for that explanation, Brother Bilal. I think we have Maulana back with us. Syed, would you like to continue where you left off? You were talking about the importance of piety in a human being, and how that can actually lead us to choosing the correct behaviors, rather than choosing behaviors that would self-sabotage us and hinder our progress and our goals.
There's a very beautiful narration from Muhammad ibn Abi Talib in which he defines the meaning of a wise person, dignity. And then he continues and says that a person who does not know his honor and dignity and respect is ignorant. He is unwise. He is not a wise person. So these kind of hadith and narrations really teach us to be on the right track. But unfortunately, we kind of distance ourselves from all these noble teachings and ignore the verses. There are at least 40 verses of Holy Quran which discuss this subject. And there are many, many narrations from Ahlebait and Prophet Muhammad in which they teach us that the honor and dignity belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the believers. But the believers are the ones who least believe in this. And they call themselves a believer, but when in practice they have the least of confidence in themselves and in dealing with the issues of the life. And most of the problems that we are facing in our society are due to ignorance and dishonoring yourself and dishonoring others. Prophet Muhammad used to say, the worst person is the person who does not care about other human beings and others in his life.
Brother Bilal, Syed raised an important point here about self-worth and value, giving value to yourself. How can people know their actual self-worth and understand their true value? What are the methods through which we can achieve that and understand what we are really worthy of, and then act according to our self-worth?
I think I have to borrow from or utilize, should I say, from what the Sayyid just mentioned about, I'm hearing the word Bani Adam, and Allah speaking about we ennobled you, Bani Adam, and giving you clothing to hide your shame, and the ayats of the Quran, for example, are a starting point. Why wouldn't it be such a beautiful thing for a person, a Muslim, right, that is feeling quite psychologically challenged or going through hardship, to actually say, okay, I'll just make wudu. I might do 2 rakats, or if I'm not a praying person, I'm not on my salah, I feel shame, I feel lowly. Wash your face, wash your hands, just make an effort to make an ablution of some sort, just to create a psychological state. Yeah. And just to pick up the Quran, you don't read Arabic, that's fine. Find the English translation, or whatever language you can read it in the translation, and read about some of those verses where Allah speaks about the human being, about our potential, and what's been placed inside of us as the descendants of Bani Adam, not because we're from a particular tribe, a particular bloodline, a particular descent, but just by being from the descent of from Adam and Hawa alayhi salam. Like, that could be a starting point, because I think we don't ponder. When Allah says in the Quran to reflect on the ayats, I think sometimes we just read and we just hear stuff, but do we really think about what we just read? We're saying that the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the worlds, the creator of the heavens and the earth, we look at the mountains, we look at all those incredible natural things around us in the natural world. Do you ever walk through the park and say that this had an origin, and that which created all of this created me and put me as part of the best of creation as a human being? Like, so who am I to be depressed, or who am I to feel self-loathing and feel sorry for myself? Or maybe I'm on a winning team, but I just need to change my headspace, So these are just some of the something simple that a believer could do, just to try and create a trajectory in the right direction. The spiritual connection, the psycho-spiritual connection is very, very, very important. Very, very important.
So beautifully explained. Syed, what do you say about this spiritual connection when we are confronted with life's difficulties and life's issues? When we are dealing with traumas of some sort, whether that's from our childhood or whether that's a recent relationship, and where, we feel that, we're at a dead end and we can't deal with our issues, remembering our connection to our God would help us reach our potential and overcome these obstacles. What do you have to say about these points that Brother Bilal just raised?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would like to quote a narration from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Prophet Muhammad, and this is especially very relevant if we look at the incidents taking place in the world. At the moment, the world is being led by people who are not religious. They want to somehow undermine religion. They want to make fun of those who are obedient to God and worship Allah and believe in a religion. So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to say, if a human being wants to discover their dignity and honor and respect and live a peaceful life, they should stick to the religion. There is no dignity without religion. If you don't have a faith, you will never discover the path of finding dignity in your life. You will not be dignified without religion. And in another place, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib والسلام, says that إن الله قد أكرمكم بدينه وخلقكم لعبادته فأنسبوا أنفسكم في أدائها. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given dignity in following the religion you follow. He's not saying Islam. Following, or in other words, having the principles in your life is a kind of aqidah, it's a kind of faith. So having a divine principle in your life, the principles given to you from a divine authority are the much better principles for your life. And so Imam Ali used to say, if you want to discover yourself, if you want to walk on the path of dignity and you want to achieve something in your life, You should never forget religion, and you should never forget being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you want to achieve everything, be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will discover and find everything that will give honor and respect and dignity to you.
Brother Bilal, what are your thoughts about what the Sayyid said about the importance of religion in order to bring clarity to one's mind and to overcome the difficulties and the challenges that they are facing?
No, I think it's a beautiful thing. When the Sayyid was speaking, I was thinking about that saying that in the Quran when it says, "For those who believe in Allah and His Messenger and the Last Day," and that's like just such a powerful cluster of words put together. Like, you know, from that springboard, there's so many avenues and so many spiritual cures for the human being, especially in a time where we live in a materialist age where people's hearts have become hardened to a certain degree, and that there is a thirst for something beyond the physical, the physical world, and people are looking for answers. And I think that, as time immemorial, that Deen of Islam speaks to that. And, as religion does in general, but the Deen of Islam in a particular way, I'm going to own my bias as a Muslim, it speaks to humanity in a way that no other religion does. But also, just to add on to that, I think the nobility and the self-help part of that is self-care. And I would like to extend this to anyone who's listening to keep in mind how important it is to have self-care, and self-care in the sense of not being selfish and self-centered and not caring about anybody else, but actually making sure that you take care of yourself. Some people are doing so much for others that they don't take care of themselves. Mums are famous for suffering with poor health because they do for everybody else. And when it's time to take care of themselves, there's nothing left in the tank. And then they can't be there for their family. But, people in general can just run themselves to the ground. So to be mindful about our sleep hygiene, how much sleep we're getting, the quality of sleep, these electronic devices, are we turning them off with this blue light that's keeping us awake at night, things of this nature? So are we careful about our sleep patterns? Because that can really enrich us, our physical beings, and enrich us spiritually and psychologically, or it can kind of hamper us to a large degree. The kind of food that we're eating, our diet, not talking about diet to lose weight, but talking about, your nutritional intake, regular meals, a certain amount of healthy meals, even if you allow yourself a little chocolate or a little, thing that, little treat. Do we take exercise? You don't have to join a gym, but do you walk? Do you move? Do you get out of that car or get away from behind that wheel or that desk and go for a walk if you're working from home? So these things also contribute to our state of mind, our state of being. Our physical and our mental is so interconnected. We have to take care. So self-care is something that I want to encourage all the believers to put. If it's on their list, put it as a priority or put it high up. And if it isn't on the list, you need to add it on that list ASAP.
Thank you for this explanation. We are approaching the end of the program. So Syed, I'd like you to make the final concluding remark regarding this topic. And also just expand a little bit more on what Brother Bilal was saying, that it's important to take care of yourselves. A lot of the times we find believers so busy doing things for others where they neglect themselves, and that can only end up and God does not want that. God wants us to use His blessings, and for those blessings to show on us, and the effect of those blessings should be visible on us, rather than we deny ourselves and we just focus on other people. What is your concluding remarks, Syed, regarding this topic?
Yes, I wanted to quote many narrations, but we had this problem today of the service that was being provided by the social media. Anyway,
we still have a few minutes, so just go ahead. You make your point.
Yes, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib والسلام, used to say and give the formula of being free. Nowadays, a lot is being said, what is the meaning of freedom? So he used to say, meaning of freedom is when you are able to control yourself. And if you are not able to control yourself, and if you use dishonesty and dishonest ways to achieve your target and your aim in your life, that is not freedom, that is slavery. So this is what we need to do. If we want to be hur, if we want to be liberated, if we want to believe in freedom, we have to follow the honesty and respect ourselves and others in our life.
Thank you, Syed. And Brother Bilal, what is your concluding remark regarding today's topic?
I don't think I could really add anything onto what the Sayyid said, but I'll just say that just to the public, not to be frightened to reach out for help, whether that's with a therapist or even finding some self-help book to read, a good self-help book, just to start the journey.
It's important to talk about one's problems as well. It's not healthy to bury them and to take it out in other ways, as you mentioned, in affecting our own self, whether we have at night or whether we are binge eating or whether we are comfort eating or, procrastinating. You'd rather talk about it with somebody qualified and put a plan of action in place to deal with
Get to the
the
root.
issues.
Get to the root of the problem. Let's get to the root of the problem and let's get to the solution.
And if one wants to grow, it's an important step to take, and it has to be taken. Thank you so much for your enlightening talk today, and I've learned a lot from you, Brother Bilal. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Syed. In spite of the difficulties, you have made very good points as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, dear viewers, for listening. See you, inshallah, next week, same day, same time. Join us again in the open dialogue. Until then, I leave you in the care and protection of Almighty God. Fi amanillah.